Okay. All right. It's all yours, Casey.
Let me see if I can get this up. Got it. Share. Okay. Am I online over there?
You're online. It's in. It's not in play format. It's in kind of slide format.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can pull it up here.
Yeah, there's a start slideshow option.
Yeah, let's see.
There we go. All right.
Not too bad. All right, thank you all. Well, first of all, I want to thank Neil for giving us the opportunity to come in and talk with you guys at the same time, not necessarily at you, because I know there's a tremendous amount of researchers over there, and the amount of time and work that you guys have done is just awesome. But I do want to at least thank some people like Joe Backus, Bart Camp, Neil, for sure, Rex Bradford, Bill Simpich, and of course, the number one guy over there. And I know I told Bart a long time ago, you're my hero, but overall, I've got to say that Malcolm Blunt, just the amount of work and time that he has spent in the archives. In fact, I heard the other day that they're going to change that from the National Archives to the Blunt Archives. So, but I also need to mention a really good friend of ours who's no longer with us, and that's Ian Griggs. And Ian helped us put one of our first presentations on in Olathe, Kansas, which is a smaller city just outside of the greater Kansas City area in 1994. And he did a super job for us, and he continues to do that with our connection with you guys. Again, thank you guys very much. And as I've been a teacher for 45 years, and my basic job was to try to bring the truth into history classes and government classes and economics. The other day, somebody asked me what subjects I taught, and I said, well, I taught American history, American government, and economics. I said, the three things that don't work in our society. And they looked at me and I said, yeah. I said, you're hitting it right on the head. And then I did have one guy come up to me, and he looked at me and he says, and this was my boss, because I'm a courier right now. And he says, you look really tired. He says, are you getting enough sleep? And I said, yeah. I said, I am, but I just heard of this new technique. He says, well, you've got bags under your eyes. And I said, well, this new technique is to take this hemorrhoid cream and rub it underneath your eyes. And as you do that, it'll take all the wrinkles out and you'll be able to see things. Well, he looked at me and he goes, he says, Quinlan, he says, if you get your head out of your ass, maybe you'll get some things done. So with that, we're going to proceed to my current PowerPoint program. And I do want to let you know, I was in the middle of two PowerPoint programs when I started to read the last 2 to 3 years, books that I hope are going to change the way we look at the murder of John F. Kennedy. And I don't know if you've read any of these books or you're willing to read them, but here's my PowerPoint, and I'll show you where I jump in and jump out. It's called Outsourcing the Murder of President Kennedy. JFK, the target of the Lancelot Project. And a picture of JFK, it says the execution of justice with extreme prejudice. The research into the murder of President Kennedy by many dedicated individuals, such as yourself over there, has brought us to the edge of the frontier. It exposes the men and the institutions who targeted President Kennedy. It uncovers the design of this execution. It examines the plan and concept for which this operation for this operation. It confirms who composed the orders to facilitate this murder and reveals most of the participants in the Dallas murder on November 22nd, 1963. Toward the end of World War II, the shifting expedient alliances that joined anti-Nazis with French pro-fascist terrorists and gangsters, anti-communists, anti-monarchists, and allied commandos, all of whom exploited the means of assassination to advance their collective and sometimes contradictory ends. The beginnings described here established the foundation for what eventually evolved into a complex set of interrelated aims, enterprises, individuals, and methods that ultimately triggered the murder of an American president. These events became a kind of assassination incorporated. It may seem incredible, but the foreshadowing of President John F. Kennedy's assassination was cast by adversaries and alliances born story began at the onset of the war, and that England created an organization called the Special Operations Executive, SOE/MI6. It was designed to carry covert missions against Nazi Germany. The United States was soon to follow with the Office of Strategic Service, OSS G2. Adolf Hitler was so impressed with British SOE/MI6 that he ordered the formation of his own special service and placed it within the Nazi foreign intelligence, the Abwehr. SS Otto Skorzeny was chosen as its top commando to lead this group and carry out several missions for the Third Reich. That little Kennedy, he thought he was a god. Direct quote by Allen Dulles, former director of the CIA. The Lancelot Project was the removal of President John F. Kennedy from the political scene permanently and in spectacular fashion. And that comes from co-author Leslie Sharp. President Kennedy was under a sentence of death when he entered the state of Texas. By the time he arrived at the marketplace called Dealey Plaza in the city of Dallas, the verdict would be finalized. The program you are about to see contains the strongest evidence ever published of a high-level conspiracy by the Military-Industrial Banking Intelligence Alliance and its ultra-right-wing allies to assassinate President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. As an author who has spent years researching and writing 3 books on the subject, I state that unequivocally. Dick Russell. The Military-Industrial Banking Intelligence Alliance, this is the format that we put together so you can see how this thing works. This program will explore the research and writings of these investigative journalists, Hank Albarelli, Quinlan Dallas, and Major Ralph P. Gaines, the Skorzeny papers. Now let me do a little sidebar here, a short but significant diversion. As a researcher during the years 2016 to 2021, this is where the brunt of my research, information, documentation on the murder of President Kennedy was headed. I was looking into Operation Pathfinder. The murder of JFKA in Dallas appears to emanate from a document dated September 25th, 1963, detailing a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who were briefed by CIA official Desmond Fitzgerald on covert operations against Fidel Castro in Cuba, known as the Pathfinder Operation. Chairing the Joint Chiefs meeting was Air Force Chief of Staff General Curtis LeMay. Now, the Pathfinder operation and the CIA Pathfinder files cut right to the heart of the matter, where the plots to kill Castro coincide with what we believe occurred in Dealey Plaza. the Dealey Plaza project, that's what I deemed it as, though its significance wasn't recognized when we first learned about Pathfinder. However, Malcolm Blunt, who has spent more time roaming the JFK records collection at the National Archives than anyone, first provided Bill Kelly with the Pathfinder documents he uncovered. Larry Hancock was one of the first to run down this alley and wrote about it in his book, Someone Would Have Talked. Bill Turner, former FBI agent, said, "We now know what happened at Dealey Plaza to a fairly good degree of certainty. The motives were piling up. The Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, the two-track back channel to Cuba, the motives were piling up to the point where they, and I always come up with that pronoun, they had to assassinate him. I think it's now pretty obvious with the information we have today that the mechanism of it came out of the alliance between the CIA and the mafia. They, the US military intelligence, already had an assassination apparatus set up for killing Castro, and they just switched targets and they killed JFK instead." Now that's from Bill Turner. In narrowing down the plot was the specific plan to kill Castro that was redirected to JFK at Dealey Plaza. We can eliminate the poisons, the bazookas, the bombs, and the poison pens and concentrate only on those contingency plans to kill Castro that utilized high-powered rifles to shoot Castro as he drove in an open car, just as JFK was killed. And Pathfinder fits that bill. Defining the AXI. The AXI is the Assistant Chief of Staff for Intelligence, one of the most ubiquitous everywhere, but at least known military intelligence agencies. With offices in the Pentagon, this organization answers directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. AXI. According to Larry Hancock, if JFK was killed by a deranged lone nut all by himself, then Pathfinder means nothing. But if the president was killed by his enemies in Washington, and what happened in Dealey Plaza was not only a conspiracy, but a very specific and narrowly defined covert intelligence operation, successfully conducted by a domestic anti-communist intelligence network, then Pathfinder is the key, the code word for the off-the-shelf contingency plan to kill Fidel Castro that was redirected to assassinate President Kennedy in Dealey Plaza. Colonel Walter Higgins took the meeting minutes and filed them in a report to his boss, General Victor Brute Krulak, Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency Activities under the Joint Chiefs of Staff, with the job of providing the military support to the CIA's covert intelligence operations, especially in Cuba. The Higgins document is not a smoking gun, but is certainly a smoking document, and is considered the single most important document so far released under the JFK Act for a number of reasons. Jim Lazar of the AARC says, "I regard this as the best lead we have ever had as to who may have been involved in the assassination of President Kennedy." Okay, the Pathfinder operation would have gone the way of Jimmy Hoffa, and we still don't know where Jimmy Hoffa is. We don't, hell, he could probably be buried over in Europe someplace. As all the documentary records of it disappeared within the purge of the CIA files, if it wasn't for three, not one or two, but three, well, actually 8, National Photographic Interpretation Center technicians who blew the whistle when they learned that Congress was interested in the CIA plots to kill Castro and came forward with their information. March 20th, 1975, at the Church Committee hearings, the following NPIC personnel who had either served in the imagery analysis services or at JM Wave on Cuban-related problems. And here's the list of these 8 individuals. Their purpose was to establish that their participation was related to case officer generated materials or bona fide operations. CIA plots to kill Castro. Note, that's 8 witnesses, not 3. The elimination of Raul Castro was first. According to the NPIC technicians, a drive-by shooting from a maritime speedboat at a Cuban North Shore estate where Fidel Castro's brother lived. There appears to be 2 plans involving Fidel Castro and an incident related to Raul Castro. This incident involving Raul Castro was not a formalized plan. It consisted of a paramilitary raid on Santiago de Cuba harbor. There was a rumor at JM Wave, the JM Wave station in Florida, that while exiting the harbor, Raul Castro's home had been fired upon by a paramilitary case officer named Rip Robertson. Now, you have a gentleman by the name of Felix Rodriguez, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. He says this, he says, I was given a weapon, a beautiful German bolt-action rifle with a powerful telescopic sight, all neatly packed in a custom-made padded carrying box, a box of ammo, 20 rounds. I was told that I wouldn't have to sight the rifle, as it had already been zeroed in. Apparently, the resistance had obtained a building facing a location that Castro frequented all the time. We were supposed to debark on a Cuban boat near Verandaro Beach, an area I knew from my childhood. From there, we would be taken to a rendezvous with members of the anti-Castro resistance. We would be provided a safe house, then move to a room where we would be able to shoot Fidel Castro. These authors and noteworthy JFK scholars have over 6 decades of research directly and correctly pointed the finger at the United States military, the CIA, the FBI, the national security state, which has driven people nuts for the last 59 years. And they pointed the finger for the murder and cover-up of President Kennedy. Their collective evidence within the release of millions of JFK-related documents has given us the correct path and direction to seek the truth. They have established significant historical evidence. Bill Simpich says, William Harvey and a few men ran the assassinations for the CIA and the military intelligence from the JM Wave CIA station in Miami. David Morales, Tony Sforza, Rip Robertson were Miami officers that specialized in operations and assassination projects against Castro. Johnny Roselli was a ZR rifle officer and no stranger on how to take somebody out. Navy Commander Hal Feeney was part of the hunt to kill Castro, the Castro brothers in 1962. These 6 men had both the skills and the motivation to kill President Kennedy. Most of these men had a military background and were intimately familiar with special operations. Their training alone mandates their inclusion among the most likely suspects for the planning of the assassination. Men like Morales and Sforza were experienced in special operations. Their buddy Rip Robertson was an adventurer that defied authority and did what he pleased off the books. Commander Hal Feeney knew how to work within the confines of authority and then did as he pleased. Feeney is a possible assassination planner. Roselli knew where to find more men with the ability and the motivation to conduct a hit job. Morales, in particular, had motive, means, and opportunity. When you start to break down the Pathfinder program, this is what these people were looking at. Everything started pointing toward the national security state of the United States. The use of the OSS, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, NATO, the MAG program in NATO, and obviously the CIA and the military intelligence. These authors and noteworthy JFK scholars have directly and correctly pointed the finger at the United States military, the CIA, the FBI, and the national security state for the murder and cover-up of John F. Kennedy. Now, I'm going to divert back because that's where my research went, and I put out another 400 slides on that. So I only brought those out so that you could see where this junction takes place. So we're going to go back down to Dallas right now. Waking up with the Kennedys, Friday morning, November 22nd, 1963. JFK's comments to his wife, Jackie, after he saw the wanted for treason poster in the Dallas Morning News: "If somebody wants to shoot me from a window with a rifle, nobody can stop it. So why bother about it?" I'm going to talk a little bit about the excerpts of JFK's final speech at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce breakfast. And he was talking basically to the military industrial system that was built in Fort Worth. 3 years ago in Fort Worth, I called for a national security policy and a national security system, which was second to none. The city responded to that call as it has throughout its history, and we have been putting that pledge into practice ever since. And he says Texas as a whole and Fort Worth bear particular responsibility for this national defense effort for military procurement. In this state totals nearly $1.25 billion. Now this is 1963 money. It was the 5th highest among all the states in the Union. There are more military personnel on active duty in this state than any in the nation. That is the result of American determination to be second to none. And you do understand that he is going to be running for the presidency in 1964. Here he says the United States of America, a country which lived in isolation, divided and protected by the Atlantic and the Pacific, uninterested in struggles of the world around it. Here in the short space of 18 years after the Second World War, we put ourselves by our own will, by necessity, into defensive of alliances with countries all around the globe. With the United States, South Vietnam would collapse overnight. Without the United States, the CETO alliance would collapse overnight. Without the United States, CENTO, the alliance, would collapse overnight. Without the United States, there would be no NATO, and gradually Europe would drift into neutralism and indifference. Without the efforts of the United States in the Alliance for Progress, the communist advance onto the mainland of South America would long ago have taken place. Now, the reason I bring this out is that I firmly believe, as a researcher, that he is talking to the very group of people that overall are going to put him to death. JFK receives a special protective Texas Stetson cowboy hat at the end of his final speech. The breakfast crowd baits him to put the Texas cowboy hat on. He says, "I'll put it on in the White House on Monday. If you come there, you'll have a chance to see it then." Well, President Kennedy is never going to put that hat on, and he would probably never put it on to begin with, especially in Texas. So JFK is flirting with disaster. Next stop, Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963. Entering Dealey Plaza, the presidential limo turns from Main Street to Houston Street. At the corner of Main and Houston Street, as the presidential limo passes in front, we see two individuals, and these two individuals have been pretty much identified as Rip Robertson and Tracy Barnes. Now, that's not 100%, but there are researchers out there that believe that these two people are there that day. Joseph Miltier in Dealey Plaza on Houston Street. Well, who is Joseph Miltier? 13 days before Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, a man named Joseph Miltier was tape recorded telling Miami police informant Willie Somerset that the murder of Kennedy was in the working, that the best means of killing Kennedy was from an office building with a high-powered rifle, and that they would pick up somebody within hours afterwards if anything like that would happen, just to throw the public off. foreknowledge of the assassination, or just a lucky guess, coupled with an uncanny understanding of how such things work? Miami police notified the Secret Service, and there are indications that an unannounced motorcade in Miami scheduled for later that month was canceled. After the Kennedy assassination, informant Somerset spoke to Miltier on the phone. Police and FBI interviews with Somerset revealed that Miltier was jubilant and said that everything ran true to form. I guess you thought I was kidding when I said he would be killed from a window with a high-powered rifle. Now, a lot of people think, well, who is Joseph Miltier? He's basically a nobody. Well, how did a nobody come up with this particular scenario? He's part of the National States Rights Party, extreme right wing. Continuing through Dealey Plaza, the presidential limo turns on Houston Street to Elm Street. Inside Dealey Plaza at Elm Street. Shots are fired in Dealey Plaza on Elm Street. The president is hit by this gunfire. The hand of God directed the bullet that killed President Kennedy. That came from General Pedro Augusto del Valle, United States Marine Corps. And he is a member of the Constitution Party, KKK, John Birch Society, National States Rights Party, okay? And he's in the United States Marine Corps. When I showed that to my father, who is a former Marine, he says, "You have no idea what you're talking about." I told my father, I said, "Dad, you have no idea what you're talking about." They shot his head off, Jackie Kennedy screamed, witnessed by Secret Service agent Clint Hill. Driving under the railroad bridge, the execution of justice is complete. Dallas citizens rushed to the knoll, the grassy knoll, the North Grassy Knoll. These two men, identified as Rip Robertson and Tracy T. Barnes, immediately after the shots were fired, these two men cautiously walked to the North Grassy Knoll. Change of command ceremonies have just been completed. This is the backside of Dealey Plaza as the presidential limo exits under the railroad bridge. The railroad bridge, or what we call the triple underpass. And if you look up here to the sign on the Texas School Book Depository building, it reads 12:30. The actual time was 12:30.17 p.m. Central Standard Time. And that was brought out in 1977 through 1979 in the House Senate Select Committee. According to the perceptions of the U.S. military, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, their covert strong-arm agency, the CIA, along with a handful of national, international, corporate Wall Street lawyers and bankers, they felt that President Kennedy is dismantling the entire national security system. His policies will collapse the Federal Reserve System and give the United States economic and banking power back to the United States Treasury Department, which is the United States Constitution. The national debt in 1963 was $62 billion, a far cry from the close to $31 trillion that it is today. His policies would have ended the Cold War and eliminated the national debt of $62 billion. Facts matter, along with complicated truth. Welcome to the fascinating world of research into the 59-year-old murder of President John F. Kennedy. One common challenge to the concept of a conspiracy is that either the institutions of law or of government would have ensured that people with knowledge of a probable conspiracy would bring it before the public and make it a matter of historical record. This program is demonstrating that as of 2017, such knowledge has become a matter of record, fragmented in memos, taped conversations, surveillance reports, biographies, desktop diaries or journals, which is what we're going to focus on, anecdotal remarks to friends and family, and deathbed confessions, but certainly not recorded in the official histories. And I do realize, and I do respect those individuals who have been breaking down the documents that have been coming out of the archives. And again, special thanks to Malcolm Blunt and Bart Camp, and I know a bunch of other individuals over there who have been working tirelessly for all of these years to bring these things out, and to bring them out so that people like myself as a teacher could make sense of it and bring it to the American public and the rest of the world. So we're going to be looking at Pierre Laffitte's desktop journal. After 59 years of continued research, these authors and significant JFK academics fundamentally believe there was a conspiracy to murder President Kennedy and a conspiracy to cover it up. Their research indicates that the national security state was directly responsible for the maneuverings. But they didn't see this coming. Outsourcing the murder of JFK, the corporations that manage the execution of JFK, the World Commerce Corporation, the Skorzeny Network, and the International Real Estate Previews Incorporated, International Real Estate Agency. The World Commerce Corporation, these were the first 4 people on the board of directors: Donovan, Dulles, Stevenson, and Hambro. We have the top heads of the OSS and British intelligence. So obviously we're not leaving you guys out. They believed, for the most part, that this is what is taking place. And this is what these authors have looked at, with the idea that everything is pointing toward national security. The World Commerce Corporation, the Skorzeny Network, and Previews Incorporated, International Real Estate. New evidence? Well, we hope it's new evidence. The Lafitte Date Book, a limited analysis by Dick Russell, submitted September 13, 2018, upon request of a film production company interested in developing a documentary focused on the book, initially titled Coup in Dallas, Who Killed JFK and Why? Pending verification by forensic document specialists and handwriting experts. Dick says, I have carefully reviewed the 1963 date book, allegedly written by Jean-Pierre Lafitte. Based on the entries I have seen, cryptic as many of them are, no doubt intentionally, this is a crucial piece of new evidence indicating a high-level conspiracy that resulted in the assassination that November 22nd of President John F. Kennedy. Many of the names mentioned are familiar to me as someone who has researched and published numerous articles and 3 books on the assassination for the past 40 plus years. A number of these names, however, were not known publicly in 1963 and for more than a decade thereafter. Thus, assuming the date book entries were indeed set down by the time by Lafitte, this adds substantial credibility to the likelihood that the documents contained never before revealed information about a conspiracy involving accused assassin Lee Harvey Oswald, as well as his own killer. Now, I can tell you, and then later on down the line, in trying to get Lafitte's date book authenticized, what we have found out is that there are two writers of this book, and it's been authenticated. It's 1963. What we're trying to figure out now is what all of this actually means, especially when it's being interpreted. According to Al Borelli, he says some of the people identified as apparent conspirators in the date book will be familiar to students of the Kennedy assassinations. Others are named for the first time publicly. The interlocking connections between Texas oil interests and the intelligence operatives are examined in detail, as well as the global reach involving fascist elements threatened by the Kennedy administration's move toward peaceful coexistence with the Soviet Union. Here, established beyond doubt, is the real perpetrators that they needed a fall guy to take the rap as a lone left-leaning gunman, The setup of Lee Harvey Oswald began months before, carefully orchestrated by a cabal of evil geniuses in espionage. One of these was James Angleton, then chief of the CIA counterintelligence. Another was Charles Willoughby, General Charles Willoughby, who formerly served as the spy master for General Douglas MacArthur. A third was Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's favorite commando, aided by the US to establish a post-war domicile in Franco's Spain, where he created secret camps to train assassins. All of this is written in Pierre Laffitte's 1963 desktop datebook. Coup in Dallas. This narrative by H.P. Albarelli Jr., co-authored with Leslie Sharp and Alan Kent, is based upon a 1963 datebook or desk diary kept by the mysterious deep cover intelligence operative named Jean-Pierre Lafitte. Albarelli had written about Lafitte, his connection to the CIA in his 2009 book, A Terrible Mistake. The Lancelot Project. It was Renée Lafitte, the wife of Pierre, that gave permission to Hank Albarelli to observe, research, and write about her late husband. Date book and desktop journal for 1963. So really, Albarelli has this book at that time, and he's only got 1963. She does not allow him to see any other years. Pierre and Renée Lafitte's datebook is the primary source for Coup in Dallas. The primary source, we now know that the desktop datebook has two authors, Pierre Lafitte and Renée Lafitte. The Lancelot Project. That is what Pierre Lafitte called the Kennedy assassination. And these are some of the letters that were brought about inside that date book, and they were broken and broken down into names like Otto Skorzeny, Oswald, James Angleton, Tracy Barnes. But the entry that was put into the book on November 23rd, 1963 was coup de grace. Definition: a final blow or shot given to kill a wounded person. And the person who put that in there was Renée Lafitte. Coup de grace ends the new frontier. It is eerie to see this come to light after all these years, a template, albeit intentionally cryptic, for the diabolical planning result in a coup d'etat that haunts our national psyche. Albarelli, author of previous books probing the US government's effort to control human behavior, as well as on the JFKA case, died of complications from a stroke in June of 2019. He was a zealous researcher who spent years developing the context that underlies the date book. This traces back to the relationships spawned in World War II, including those with Nazis, subsequently utilized by US intelligence during the Cold War. Operation Paperclip, the Nuremberg trials. Esteemed JFK historians have argued for years that November 22nd was more than a systematic adjustment. Hank Albarelli makes the case that the assassination was indeed a coup d'etat, by demonstrating that among the planners and the perpetrators were mutinous elements within the US intelligence, military ranks, and industry, who held immense power and influence, sufficient to overturn the Democratic election of John F. Kennedy and get away with it. Albarelli presents persuasive evidence, much of it ignored or misunderstood previously, to prove that the assassination cabal included holdovers from Hitler's Third Reich and Texas-based powers, passed deadly judgment on Kennedy's platform, which at its core was the commitment to full democracy on a global scale. Madeline and Duncan Brown, an advertising executive who previously claimed To have had an extended love affair and son with President Lyndon B. Johnson, said that she was present at a party at Clint Murchison's Dallas home on the evening of the assassination of President Kennedy that was attended by Johnson, as well as other famous, wealthy, and powerful individuals, including J. Edgar Hoover, Richard Nixon, and H.L. Hunt. According to Brown, Johnson had a meeting with several of these men, after which he told her, "After tomorrow, those goddamn Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat. That's a promise." Now, we know that there are several books, a lot of books that have been written pointing the finger at Lyndon Johnson. I personally do not believe that Lyndon Johnson ordered this. There are some of my colleagues that actually believe that. I believe that as Vice President of the United States, he was informed and he knew that it was coming down the pike. He may have sat in some of these meetings and decided that this was the best route to, for America and the world to take. And if you get into Johnson, you're going to find out that he is something else. And I used to think that, and I still think today, that a lot of our presidents in the United States are bought and paid for before they even enter office. America has begun to crumble. From the silence of the people involved came a great miscarriage of justice and an almost complete loss of faith by the American people in their government and its agencies. Due to their active or passive participation in the continued cover-up, we are faced 59 years after the fact with the still unsolved murder of one of the world's greatest leaders. The assassination of President Kennedy was a brutal action that changed our domestic and foreign policy and reshaped history. That was Gary Shaw. Recently, he also wrote back in 1976, coming from the book Cover Up, as in every great empire of the past, America has begun to crumble from within. The power-mad, hungry cabal that killed JFK believes that it knows what is best for this country. It will never again permit the accidental election to the presidency of a person like John Kennedy. The object of the Lancelot Project was the removal of President John F. Kennedy from the political scene permanently and in spectacular fashion. Paramount to the success of the operation was a guarantee that those behind the plot would never be brought to bear. The greatest threat to that anonymity was the potential arrest and subsequent identification of the assassin or assassins. So aside from the requisite technical skills, the criteria for their selection had been a history of entrenched service to those within the hierarchy of the conspiracy. At the core of that trust was the record of intense loyalty and shared ideology that the conspirators could rely on. These were not merely hired guns. In exchange, of course, the shooters were guaranteed significant compensation. But more critical was the assurance that as soon as Kennedy was annihilated, they would be spirited out of Dallas into virtual oblivion. The insertion of Lee Harvey Oswald. To that end, the strategists of Lancelot devised a set of foolproof deflections during the first 48 hours following the shooting of President Kennedy, while the killers fled. Drawing from a handbook of magic tricks, the insertion of a patsy, a pigeon, into the drama, one who would be arrested within hours of the crime, while the murderers left Texas, while the diversion of choice. Enter Lee Harvey Oswald. One of the takeaways of note from the coup in Dallas is that key on the ground players, including likely shooters, were not the Cubans that researchers have spent a great deal of time chasing around, but crazy, extremely right-wing Texas white men such as Cannon and Askins, who had long ago entered the domain of General Willoughby. Now, I don't have time to go into this, but Cannon and Askins are colonels in the OSS during World War II. And you will find that there's a tremendous amount of carryover that these individuals had. And it does point in the direction of the OSS. It does point in the direction of the CIA. It does point in the direction of the national security. These guys worked under Charles Willoughby. The Lafitte Datebook provides us with the actual corporations that were used to facilitate the execution of President Kennedy. Those corporations, the outsourcing of this murder, you know, it kind of reminds me of biblical history where Pontius Pilate washes his hands and well, I think that's about international law, international corporations, and we outsourced the murder of JFK by using these corporations. Well, who formed the corporations? Donovan, Dulles, Stevenson, and Hambro. What for? And I tell you what, I'm not sure if I'm going to get into all this, but the Lafayette Datebook provides us with actual facilitators responsible for the execution of President Kennedy. Here's the facilitators. This is what the Datebook is going to tell you. That Tracy Barnes was the mastermind. That Pierre Lafitte was the project manager. That Otto Skorzeny is the logistical mastermind in training assassins and hitmen. Jack Crichton is the boots on the ground. He's the logical mastermind. He set up and he was part of the cleanup of Dealey Plaza. James Angleton, logistical mastermind, set up Lee Harvey Oswald on the books of the CIA. Edwin Walker, logistical mastermind, provided assassination teams and kill squads. Charles Willoughby, logistical mastermind, assassination teams and kill squads. Most of us have heard of all these names before. Albarelli puts them into order. Only an all-encompassing ideological remit of those who were involved directly and indirectly could effectively explain the motivation of the plot, the approval, the execution, and the cover-up. Although the concept remains controversial in some quarters, how could so many be involved or stand by as a coup unfolded? During Albarelli's investigations, an inescapable conclusion emerged. Those individuals and the causes they served had been ideologically aligned since World War II, and in ways that collectively compelled them to regard JFK's removal as both necessary and inevitable. Albarelli believes that those interests and the organizations operated in tandem with the development and dramatic expansion of U.S. intelligence, while cloaking themselves in nationalistic movements and in distorted religiosity on a global scale to disguise their true aims. Tracy Barnes hugs the flag of the United States. And so did these guys. These men set into motion the removal of President John F. Kennedy from the political scene permanently and in spectacular fashion. Tracy Barnes, Allen Dulles, Jack Crichton, James Angleton, Otto Skorzeny, Charles Willoughby, Edwin Walker, Pierre Lafitte, Harold Hunt, Santos Traficante. During Albarelli's investigation, an inescapable conclusion emerged. These individuals and the causes they served have been ideologically aligned since World War II, the last 18 years, and in ways that collectively compelled them to regard JFK's removal as both necessary and inevitable. Now, what I'm going to do right here, guys, is I realize that I'm running a little bit out of time, and I want to keep on time for us. So let me jump to the end real quick, just to show you some idea about where we're going with this. Okay, Otto Skorzeny controlled these channels of transmission during the Lancelot project. He controlled NATO, who was under Lemnitzer and Dulles. The MAG, Military Assistance and Advisory Group. And if the United States wanted somebody assassinated, MAG was the vehicle used to conduct this capability. And that capability was designed by and for Otto Skorzeny in Madrid, Spain. This was commissioned by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Lyman Lemnitzer, the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, NATO. Executive action developed by Bill Harvey. directed by Otto Skorzeny, QJ Win, implemented by Jean Swetra, QJ Win, protected and concealed by the 488th Military Intelligence Detachment in Dallas, controlled by Jack Crichton, and he had the Dallas Police as well, in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963, and covered up and protected the national security state in the Pentagon. These individuals, military intelligence, the OSS and the CIA, and corporations, industrial as well as national and international corporations, knew and protected Elsie and Otto Skorzeny as covert assassination assets. Their connections and capabilities they brought to the American intelligence community after World War II. These are the people that knew of Skorzeny. They set him up as an assassination specialist. Donovan and Dulles, the Skorzeny Network, the World Commerce Corporation, and Previews Incorporated. 59 years after President Kennedy's assassination, the majority of Americans believe that his murder occurred as a result of a conspiracy. The release of thousands of government documents, transcripts, and tapes confirm that others had a stronger motive to remove him from his elected position. By avoiding our responsibility for the escalating crimes of state done for our security, we who failed to confront the unspeakable opened the door to JFK's assassination and its cover-up. The unspeakable is right in front of us. In the end, the very same high-placed group that initiated the decision to assassinate President Kennedy and the minders of the network that managed the execution later populated the Warren Commission. This resulted in the ultimate fox in the henhouse outcome and the greatest cover-up of congressional investigations in American history. All right, guys, I'm going to end right there so that we at least try to keep on time here. And at the same time, I'll open up for some questions and hopefully be able to provide some answers for you.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. So there's quite a lot to take in there.
Oh, God.
David, microphone.
Yeah. Unless you want to just relay it.
No, in case I misunderstand.
Hi there, thanks. Sorry about that. From what you've been looking into, as Neil suggested, there is rather a lot to take in. From all the work and reviewing of others' work that you've done, Casey, can you have you been able to form any idea as to precisely when this organisation or the key decision makers within this group decided, right, enough is enough, Kennedy must now go? What was it? When was it? What was it he did that was like the final straw?
Okay, that's a very good question, and for years I've been trying to figure that out, as well as maybe a lot of you guys too. However, according to the coup in Dallas, Al Borelli only got the 1963 date book, and Renee Lafitte would not provide the other books for him, but she said there's a lot of history in here, you can break it down, and she says I'll help you. In January of 1963, they were already talking about the murder and elimination of President Kennedy. So I have to put a little bit 2 and 2 together, and I said, what gave them that particular the planning in January? Something must have happened prior to that. So I would say that all of 1962, especially when you go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, I would say the Cuban Missile Crisis was the key. And I think it probably was the last straw that broke the camel's back in this case. And I think they started to plan for his murder. However, I don't have the other date books. and I would certainly like to get a hold of those, and I do know where they are. So the problem with that is trying to get access to them right now because of litigation and legalistic terminology. But at the same time, my idea is that the last straw was probably the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the idea that Kennedy was not going to use thermonuclear weapons on Cuba or anybody else.
Anybody else? Is this Albarelli book a tough read?
Okay. I'm in my 4th reading. Okay. And I'm going to tell you right off, I'm a history adjunct professor. And when I first read it, I was mesmerized by it because of Dick Russell. And the beginning of the book, it just pulls you right straight in. Now, the problem with that is that you really have to be, I believe, a researcher to understand and comprehend some of the names that are out there. But again, at the same time, I've done this with students even at the high school level. I said, well, if you don't understand something, take a piece of paper, write it down, and then we'll try to figure out exactly what it is, and I will help you do that. It's a tough read for the most part if a lot of you don't understand who these people are. But it's my understanding that a lot of you people do understand who these people are. And if you can put these together and try to figure out where this date book comes from and what it was supposed to be about, and it's all about the murder of JFK and the people who are putting this program together. Do I believe it? Yes, I believe it 100%. It does fill in a lot of the missing pieces of the puzzle, and it fills them in not 100%, but it fills them into probably about 85% of who I thought might have been behind this. Now, you're looking at a person who has a belief since I was in high school that President Kennedy was probably murdered by a conspiracy. And I did not believe, after I read the Warren report, then the Warren Commission documents, when I was going through those documents, I'm sitting there going, you got to be kidding me. But at the same time, I would look at all the documents that we have, and then look at all the document releases that we've had over the past, probably over the past 30 to 35 years. And again, Malcolm Blunt and Bart Camp right up there with that in getting these things out. But at the same time, I've always looked at the possibility that who could do something like this and get away with it. And I've always felt that, I want to point the finger at the government of the United States. I think everybody else does, but I think what has happened is it's entities inside the government of the United States. It's covert intelligence operations inside military and the different walks of the military, Office of Naval Intelligence, G2 Army Intelligence. And then I think you really have to go back to World War II. Once as a teacher, teaching about World War II, I started getting into that, and I'm going, my gosh, this could be the beginning of of where the assassination of President Kennedy came from. So you have to understand World War II. And now, God forbid, I haven't read every book on World War II, but from the American viewpoint, and also I think from the United Kingdom viewpoint, you guys have tremendous amounts of information. In fact, once we started to look at whatever documents we could actually expose or at least interpret on the area of covert intelligence, heck, we're looking at the British intelligence, and the Americans looked at British intelligence, and they were wined and dined on that particular intelligence, and we formed our OSS. And not only that, but Hitler saw what the British had, and they said, my God, he says, I'm going to form something like that and bring it right into his foreign intelligence, which was the Abwehr. So at the end of World War II, British, I think it was Churchill, was in the process of getting rid of the SAS, and I don't think he actually wanted it, but whoever took his position took it over, and it got rid of that. And Truman got rid of the OSS, because Truman basically said something of this nature, that we don't want a Gestapo inside the United States of America. Well, he got it, whether he knew it or not, and that was in the auspices of William Donovan and Allen Dulles, and those guys weren't the only guys. But you are tying the military-industrial complex into this, and that's what Eisenhower said when he was getting out of office. And I think he was giving us hints. He was giving us hints that he says, beware of this connection. And the connection is not just the military and the CIA and these organizations, but it is in the idea of corporations. And that is where Albarelli goes. And I would highly suggest that you guys read this book. And is it a first time read? No. Is it a second time read? No. In fact, I drive all day. And what I do is I copy off one chapter at a time. And then when I get times to read something, I will sit down and break it down. And that's what I've done for the past year. And I know personally the co-authors, Alan Kent and Leslie Sharp, and they're going to be down in Dallas on a panel that we have put together at the JFK Historical Conference, November 19th and 20th and 21st. And we would invite you guys to at least come there in person. But if not, David Knight is going to stream that. And I just wanted to let you guys know that. So, but
that's yeah, I was going to mention that later on, actually. We are overrunning, but I'd like one more question. Malcolm wants to ask you something.
Yeah, hi, Casey. It's Malcolm Blunt. First of all,
hi, Malcolm.
Thanks for your kind comments. I don't deserve them. But still, I was interested in Tracy Barnes because I interviewed a career retiree from the agency a long while ago. And he said he told me that Tracy Barnes was a much bigger player in CIA than people think. Because Tracy Barnes was involved in a big way with corporations and companies. We're talking prior to '63. And he had an office which was very close to the White House. And I just thought that was interesting that you brought up Tracy Barnes in your presentation. The other thing I was interested in was the Hank Albarelli sent me several pages from the Lafitte desk book. And to be honest, I think I'm pretty knowledgeable on many of the names. And I didn't recognize in those pages, I think I recognized about 5 people or 6 people. So did you make any further progress on a lot of those names? Because Hank was having trouble at that time running those names down.
Thank you, Malcolm. That's a very good, keen observation, and obviously, thank you for all that you have done. First of all, on Tracy Barnes, I think, is hidden within the woodwork of the CIA, and I think he was hidden there for a reason, and that was I think that was Allen Dulles who hit him, but I can't say that for exact, but I know that Barnes was put together at close to the end of World War II, and Dulles was his boss at that time, and Dulles was real happy to bring him into the fold, so to speak, of the OSS, because of the work that Barnes had done with Great Britain in the Jedburghs, and he was going to use him as a person. In fact, I believe Tracy Barnes's code name, at least coming into the OSS, was Trick, and I don't know if that was used by Pierre Lafitte or not. But to answer the last question part for you there, we have made a little bit of progress, but not that much, and we're still trying to figure out who these names are. And as I said, Leslie Sharp and Alan Kent have access to this material, but it's being tied up by the Albarelli family. And at one time we had access to it, but then it's sitting with the lawyers now. And that's, you know, how much of a process that is. That could be years trying to get that information out. And we're not going to give up. I know my wife asked me one time, she says, well, it's the 50th anniversary. Are we done? And I said, are we done? Are you kidding me? I said, Malcolm Blunt is just getting ready to open up the damn archives. So I know we're not done, but we will continue with that as much as we can, Malcolm, and try to figure out who they are and come up with some ideas and names. Thank you for the questions.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Casey. I think we're going to have to call it a day now. Brian does know that you have overrun. I think it was in line with expectations.
Well, thank you guys. And again, you guys are certainly welcome in Dallas. And if not, it'll be, I think, JFK Historical Group. And you can probably get that online. And I know David Knight is going to probably tell you a little bit more about that, but he's going to stream it for those people who can't be there. Again, thank you guys. Thank you, Neil, very much for inviting me. See you guys.